is -50 degrees Celsius outside. The tent walls are made of wool, and a Mongol family is already moving. The mother is up first, working the coals with bare hands before they die completely. Everything today starts with her. The father is already outside checking the animals before the wind picks up. Even the children have jobs, some as young as 3 years old. Every morning, this family ran the same order. Every person had one role. Every role fed into the next one. Miss any of it, and the day started falling apart. 120 days. No sick days, no days off. Remove one element, and the whole structure collapses. Chapter 1. The GR isn't a tent. It's a thermal machine that's been refined over 2,500 years. Step inside. It's circular because wind can't find a corner to hit. Gusts strike the curved felt walls and slide over the frame. A square structure would shake and bleed heat at the seams. The GR doesn't resist wind. It moves it around. The walls are wool felt, sometimes 10 centimeters thick in winter. Sheep's wool traps air in thousands of tiny pockets. Even frozen, it insulates. Families change the layers with the season. More wraps in winter, fewer in summer, by adjusting how tight the felt sat against the lattice frame. The structure adjusted. At the top is the crown, the tonneau. It's a wooden wheel holding the roof poles. But it's also chimney, skylight, and pressure valve. Smoke from the fire rises and leaves. Heat stays below. In deep cold, a felt flap could partly cover the opening overnight to hold warmth, then open at dawn to vent moisture and carbon monoxide. The family controlled airflow with one piece of fabric. The hearth sits in the center, not for symbolism, for heat distribution. A fire in the middle warms all edges evenly. Put it against a wall, and half the space stays cold. But the hearth is also sacred. You don't step over it. You don't point your feet at it. You don't throw trash into it. This isn't superstition. It's fire safety enforcement in a home made of wool and wood, where one mistake kills everyone. The space is divided. Men sit on the west side, women on the east. Honored guests to the north, farthest from the door. This isn't random. It's workflow. The women's side is near the entrance, close to water storage, milk containers, cooking tools. The men's side holds weapons, saddles, herding gear. When 7 to 10 people spend 4 months together in tight quarters, spatial order prevents chaos. The threshold is sacred. You don't step on it, partly symbolic, mostly because it's the weakest point in the frame, and stepping on it wears the wood down. Inside this 10 square meter circle, temperature can hold at 10 degrees Celsius to 15 degrees Celsius, while the step outside sits at -40 degrees Celsius. The fuel is dried dung. The insulation is wool. The heating system is one fire, and the body heat of the family sleeping shoulder to shoulder under sheepskin. It works because every part has a job. The shape, the material, the spatial zones, the rules. This isn't just shelter. It's built around winter. Chapter 2. The first person awake isn't waking up. She's restarting the system. It's still dark. The fire from the night before has died to embers, buried under ash to slow the burn. The interior temperature has dropped, not to outside cold, but close enough that breath shows in the air. The mother rises first. In traditional Mongol households, women controlled the domestic schedule. Men's work began after the fire was lit and the animals were ready. She moves to the hearth. The embers are still there, banked correctly the night before, covered in ash to preserve the coals through the coldest hours. She brushes the ash aside, adds dry grass, then places dried dung on top. The dung was collected year-round, dried in the sun or by the fire, and stored in a pile near the GR entrance. A well-maintained dung pile was survival currency. Families judged a household's competence by the size and dryness of its reserve. Dung burns slower and more evenly than wood, which is scarce on the steppe. It gives steady heat without the flare-ups that waste fuel or crack clay stoves. The fire builds. Smoke rises through the tonneau. The air begins to warm. Next, water. In deep winter, water doesn't flow. It's chipped from ice or melted from snow collected the day before. She fills a pot and sets it over the flame. Then comes the first task that defines the day: milk tea. Sute tsai is hydration, calories, and heat delivery in a single bowl. Water, brick tea, milk, salt, sometimes butter or fat, it's drunk throughout the day. It's the first thing offered to any visitor, stranger, neighbor, even enemy. Not offering tea is social death. Refusing to drink it is insult. The tea boils. She pours it into wooden bowls. The family wakes to warmth, firelight, and the smell of salt and milk. Before the sun touches the steppe, the system is alive again. The fire burns. The tea is poured. The day can begin. Chapter 3. If men handled the herds, women handled survival. The family didn't live on meat. They lived on milk, and that was the woman's domain. Mares got milked 5 to 6 times a day when they were lactating. Cows and yaks twice. Sheep and goats once or twice, usually the kid's job. You couldn't just skip one. Miss a milking and the yield drops. Risk infection. The whole day moved around those cycles, not around convenience. And the milk never sat, it got used. Airag, fermented mare's milk, was a little alcoholic, full of probiotics, vitamins B and C. You made it by pouring milk into a leather sack hung up inside the GR and stirring it, constantly. Anyone who walked past gave it a few stirs. That kept the fermentation even. What you got was a drink that worked as water, food, and alcohol all at once. Useful when you're not exactly swimming in vegetables. Then there was aaruul, dried curds. You boiled the milk, strained it, added salt, shaped it, and left it to dry. On the roof in summer or near the fire in winter. It came out hard as a rock. Lasted for months. You could eat it dry, soak it in tea, crumble it into soup. That was your winter buffer. When the animals weren't giving much milk, aaruul kept you going. Women made butter, cream, yogurt, cheese, at least 10 to 15 different products, each with its own method and timing. If you were good at dairy, your family ate well and had something to trade. If you weren't, people went hungry. Men's work had edges. You went out with the herd, you came back. You kept watch, your shift ended. Women's work didn't stop. Milking, cooking, watching the kids, gathering fuel, sewing, making felt. Anthropologists point out that this meant men had downtime in winter. Women didn't. The work never paused because the needs never paused. You couldn't push a milking to tomorrow or take a week off. The system only worked if you kept feeding it, and women were the ones feeding it. The jur didn't run on plunder or coins. It ran on milk, and women ran the milk. Chapter 4. The steppe doesn't negotiate, and neither did the men tasked with keeping 200 animals alive in it. While women worked inside and near the GR, men spent hours exposed to conditions that froze skin in minutes. Their job was managing a multi-species life support system in an environment trying to kill both them and it. The 5 snouts, horses, cattle, camels, sheep, goats, each species needed different management. Horses could dig through snow to reach grass, a behavior called terelge. They were the most self-sufficient and needed the least supervision. Sheep needed guidance to food and were vulnerable to wolves and cold. Camels resisted cold well, but could be fatally stubborn when stressed. Cattle and yaks were sturdy but slow. They needed cleared grazing spots in deep snow. Goats were agile but prone to wandering and freezing. Men knew which animals needed what, where, and when. Winter grazing wasn't random. Mongols practiced rotational pasture management generations before it had a name. Winter camps were chosen for wind-cleared areas or south-facing slopes where snow sat thinner. Men knew the micro-terrain, where snow drifts, where it doesn't, where spring grass survives under ice. Losing this knowledge meant a dead herd. Then there were the wolves. Wolves hunt in winter when prey is scarce. Livestock are easy targets. Men took watch shifts at night, often on horseback, with dogs. Fires were lit near the herd. Bells tied to lead animals to alert to panic. A single wolf attack could cost 10 to 20 sheep. A winter's worth of food and trade gone in minutes. The clothing wasn't decorative, it was functional. The deal: a single-piece wool robe lined with sheepskin or fur, long enough to cover legs on horseback. The design left no gaps for wind. A sash at the waist allowed heat regulation and created a pouch for carrying tools, food, even newborn lambs. In extreme cold, men wore multiple deals, fur hats, and felt boots. Freezing wasn't dramatic. It was incremental. Fingers, toes, ears went first. You didn't feel it until damage was done. Mongolian pastoral culture prized stoicism and competence under pressure. Boys learned early. You don't complain, you solve. Emotional regulation was a survival skill. Modern research shows pastoral children develop high resilience and problem-solving ability because they face real consequences young. Men were managing a 200-head system that kept the family alive through a season trying to kill them. The herd provided milk, meat, wool, leather, trade value, and transportation. Lose the herd, lose everything. So they dressed in layers, rode in darkness, slept in shifts, and watched the snow for wolf tracks and the sky for weather they couldn't avoid, but could prepare for. The work didn't end at sunset. It paused, then resumed. Chapter 5. By age 3, children rode. Not in circles on a lead line. They rode out on the steppe, on actual horses, in wind strong enough to knock grown men sideways. At 6, some raced. By 10, they rode alone for miles, managed herds, navigated by stars and landscape features, read animal behavior to find their way home. If you couldn't ride, you were functionally illiterate. The steppe didn't accommodate that. Girls learned dairy work, sewing, felt making, childcare, how to receive guests. Boys learned herding, distance riding, hunting, but both learned enough of the other's work to survive alone if they had to. If your spouse died, you had to run everything. Cross-training wasn't optional, it was the backup plan. Children's work mattered. It wasn't symbolic. Fetching water meant breaking through ice, carrying a heavy container without spilling, not freezing your fingers. Collecting dung meant knowing which pieces were dry enough to burn, where to find them under snow, how much you needed to last the night. Watching younger siblings meant keeping them close to the fire, but away from the open hearth. Keeping them quiet enough that adults could focus. Herding nearby sheep and goats meant spotting when one wandered, recognizing cold stress, sensing when a predator was around. These tasks were training in how the whole system worked. Older children milked livestock, stirred airag, took early night watch. By adolescence, they did adult work at full capacity. There was no gap between being a child and being useful. You did what you were capable of doing. Capability decided your role, not your age. Winter darkness came early, 5 or 6 in the afternoon. The family finished the last milking. Dinner was mutton, dumplings, dairy, eaten together. People told stories about ancestors, horses, lessons, things to watch out for. Oral history was how knowledge moved between generations. No writing. The family was the archive. Then sleep. But not all night without interruption. In the coldest months, or when wolves were active, someone stayed awake or woke periodically to check the animals and tend the fire. Older children sometimes took the earlier shifts. The coldest stretch, 3 to 5 in the morning. was the most dangerous. Fires went out. Animals panicked. Wolves came close. Sleep happened in segments. Rest was planned. Inside, people slept close together under sheepskin. The felt walls held warmth from the day. The ger felt like one organism, breathing, alive, warm, but never silent. Snoring, animals moving outside, wind against the frame, the crackle of burning dung. The steppe didn't rest. Neither did the family. By 10, a Mongol child had lived through a dozen winters. They knew cold. They knew hunger. They knew how to keep a fire going, keep a herd together, keep a household running when the air outside could kill them. No one taught them resilience as a concept. They practiced it every day, with real stakes, and when they had children, they passed the same system down. Not because of tradition, because it worked. The knowledge didn't exist in books. It lived in how your body moved, how you read the sky, the animals, the needs of a family that never stopped moving. You learned by watching, then doing, then showing someone younger. The system copied itself forward, not through manuals, through survival. Outro. The Mongol family didn't defeat winter. They designed a life around it. Every role mattered. The mother woke before dawn and restarted the fire. The father spent 10 hours in lethal cold managing animals that could dig through snow or panic at the scent of wolves. The children learned to ride before they learned to read, because on the steppe, a child who couldn't ride was a child who couldn't survive. Every task had a sequence. Rekindle the fire, boil the tea. Milk the mares 6 times. Process the milk into airag, aaruul, butter, and a dozen other products that would keep the family alive when snow covered the grass and the animals stopped producing. Clear the pasture, rotate the herd, watch for wolves, collect dung, fetch water, stir the airag, check the fire, sleep in shifts. Every material had a function. Wool felt insulated even when frozen. Dung burned slow and even. Milk became nutrition, hydration, and economic power. The deal left no gap for wind. The GR itself, a circular aerodynamic structure you could put up in 2 hours that would hold a family of 10 at 15 degrees Celsius, while the steppe outside sat at -50 degrees Celsius. Remove one element and the whole thing falls apart. Miss a milking and you lose yield. Skip a watch shift and you lose sheep. Let the fire die completely and you wake to freezing children. Fail to teach a child to ride and you've created a dependent in a system with no room for passengers. This was precision. The GR still stands. Families still live in them. The knowledge still transfers parent to child. Not in classrooms, but in the cold, in the dark, in the middle of tasks that haven't changed in 2,500 years. You were never supposed to know how functional this was, how elegant, how engineered, but now you do. If this kind of systems thinking interests you, the kind that survived millennia because it worked, not because someone wrote it down, you'll want to see what we cover next. We're going inside the Viking longhouse in winter. Same problem, lethal cold, no modern infrastructure, a family managing survival, different solution entirely. Subscribe if you want to see how they did it, and tell me in the comments. What other ancient winter systems do you want broken down? The steppe is still there, the families are still there, and the fire gets lit every morning, exactly the way it always was.